these concepts, which are pretty radical for their time, play a key part. The French and Indian War is also known as the 7 Years' War. Good to know. How did the Enlightenment and the Iroquois Confederacy influence the Revolutionary War? We kind of talked about the Iroquois Confederacy and the French and Indian War. The Enlightenment, I'm just going to direct you to kind of go back to that, but there are a lot of different ways in which the Enlightenment sort of influences the thinking of Americans and their ideas of liberty. And since most of the founding fathers, those people we identify, people like Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and all these gentlemen, consider themselves people of the Enlightenment, that they develop distinctive concepts of liberty and read widely from those who are talking about different ideas of government and different ways of organizing government, and the focus of the Enlightenment on the individual makes Americans increasingly think of freedom as a very individualistic thing, right? Like my personal freedom, this personal liberty, versus the Commonwealth idea in England, which combined liberty but with order, right? Like there is an aristocracy. Some people are supposed to be at the top, some people are supposed to be at the bottom. That's the way it is. Okay, how are the colonists more free or given more liberties than British citizens in England? Shout them out. Somebody over here.
The same concept, Commonwealth, that didn't really exist in the colonies at the time. It's mostly everyone is merchant or farmer, and their social status was more economically tied than by birth.
Okay, so you didn't have the rigid social structure. You could move up if you wanted to. What else?
They were more free of taxes than
Okay.
those in Britain.
Yep, salutary neglect, very little taxation, very little regulation from England. It's just kind of, hey, you guys are making us money, do whatever you feel like, right? Until we change our minds. Anything else? I'm just going to rely on you guys to answer some of these. A lot easier to get land, right? So the availability of land, right? I can't remember if I read you this quote or not. I think it may be in one of the slides. But there's this quote from Thomas Jefferson about where he talks about Europe as like this big, awful city, right? Like the whole of Europe is just one giant city, which of course is not true. But this idea that it's so urbanized and there's no land left, and land is so important to the idea of liberty, especially in Locke's thought, John Locke's thought, and Jefferson's thought, that that is a critical sort of liberty. All right, how did no taxation without representation lead to the Declaration of Independence, Second Continental Congress, and the Declaration of Independence? So, and we're kind of talking about all of this with what we've said already, but all of this ties into all those cultural aspects. I'm just going to go over this part quickly because there's a bunch of stuff here. But there are all these cultural aspects, right? Like the idea of, in order to run for office, you have to be sort of a man of leisure and have the economic means because you have to be totally independent, and all these concepts of liberty. The end of the French and Indian War opens up all this land. And then as we get increasing taxation from England, after we've had all this time where we could just kind of do whatever we wanted, all of a sudden we freak out, right? And we're like, whoa, we should really, have representation if we're going to be taxed. Now this idea is a later idea. It kind of develops over time as we get closer to revolution. But it is a critical idea that leads to ultimately the Declaration of Independence. Second Continental Congress, which orders the drafting of that declaration. All right, So then we get into some of these philosophical ideas that are critical. What is the state of nature? What sources influenced Jefferson in drafting the Declaration of Independence? I go over that in pretty good detail in the slides, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot here, but we have Hobbes, we have Machiavelli, we have Locke, right? We have these different political philosophers who are all mentioned in there, who Jefferson kind of draws on different aspects of their ideas in order to create this very revolutionary document, which I kind of talk about as the original work of science fiction, because it was so revolutionary and seemingly far-fetched, and Jefferson, in a way, used it primarily to unite the people, right, who were signing it, because they were effectively signing their death warrant. That helped to unite them as a people in the cause and give them their one chance. But it takes a bunch of ideals and turns them into the foundation for trying to create a new government, which is a crazy idea at the time, right? That you're just going to go, hey, a bunch of philosophers said this and that and this other thing, therefore, hey, we don't have to be a part of your country anymore, right? Kind of crazy for the time. Was there a hand here, or just that was stretching? See, I see things. That's a hand.
So, I guess short term, what would be the answer?
To
science fiction.
The short answer, I think I gave the short answer. Do I deal in short answers? I don't know. You tell me. What do you think it is? And I'll tell you if you're right. How about that? Let's play this game. Yeah. You can phone a friend if you'd like. Was there a hand over here?
I was guessing
Because it talked about a society that didn't exist yet.
Okay.
The first of its kind, and they were talking about it as though it was something that could exist, should exist, will exist, even though it had never really before been tested on that scope.
Yeah. If we go and kind of put this in the context of England again, right? Where we talked about, if you remember, we talked about the extent of English liberties, right? And how the English thought of themselves as having extensive liberty. Well, how did they get that liberty? They didn't sit down one day and write a document and go, we think we should have liberty for the following reasons, and so we're going to cook up a document, form a government, right? No, it was won over a series of wars, conflicts, activities, different documents, right, from Magna Carta forward, the charters that were given to various cities in England, right? So for most countries, for all countries actually up to this point, they exist because they evolve over centuries to become a certain way. So the idea of just like saying, nope, we're going to go and design a country and we're going to give specific reasons why we should be a separate country, those are radical, really strange ideas that have never been out there before. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. Why does Professor Peterson consider the Declaration? Okay, we did that. Okay, Antebellum and Translatio Studi et Imperi. So this is, again, that idea that civilization and empire and power followed the sun and they moved from east to west. And so it was kind of culturally in the minds of many Americans that they were just sort of destined to be the next great power, right? And to be the power center of the world. And you see that even early on, where they talk about how they're going to have the greatest philosophers and scientists and writers and poets, even though at that point they had produced virtually none, right? So they didn't have like some basis in terms of actual evidence for the time to say we're going to be the greatest nation ever. But they just had this belief that based on this sort of concept that it would occur. Okay, George Washington and Cincinnatus. These guys, yeah, they basically, Cincinnatus was a role model. He's an ancient Roman role model for George Washington, and he influenced George Washington's decision to run for 2 terms and then leave office, right? Kind of set aside the power that he's been given and go back to his normal life, right? And this is really critical. This is probably one of the most important things that happens in early America, because it establishes the idea that we don't have a king, we have a president, and there's a limit to that power, and it's going to change, right? That America changes and is dynamic and has elections. And one of the most important things that it establishes, and this is very important to understand, is the idea of rule of law, right? So it's not whoever is in charge who makes the decisions at whim, but it is the law of the land which is most important, the Constitution which is most important to the United States. And that's unique, right? Because as we'll talk about later, there are a variety of countries. If we go and look at constitutions from different countries all over the planet, you will see that many of them are based on our Constitution, right? You will see language that's very similar. You will see institutions that are similar. You will see ideas that have basically been copied from our Constitution. But in many of those nations, it doesn't work out the same way, because they do not have embedded in their culture this idea of the rule of law, that law is more important than the person in charge, which is why, like we talked about briefly last time with Mexico and Santa Anna, right? Santa Anna gets elected president of Mexico when it's a brand new country, about a decade after it's gained its independence. And he becomes president, starts making reforms, then people don't like him, and then he kind of goes, all right, I'll just kind of take over everything. I'll shut down Congress, I'll give myself all the power, I'll go conquer anybody who doesn't like me, right? So that idea is a really critical, like that's the big gift that George Washington gives America. I talked a little bit about leisure. The Great Awakening and the growth of organized religion. Great Awakening, this is kind of tricky because the Great Awakening doesn't necessarily contribute to organized religion. It destroys it a little bit, right? It goes and undoes in each town, right? Especially New England. That town had a pastor and a particular religious affiliation, and probably just about everybody in town was the same religion and went to the same church. The Great Awakening, with these traveling preachers who come through and talk about different ideas and competing ideas, that kind of upsets the apple cart, and the idea that I can just sort of, I don't know, switch to a different religion or take some time off and think about what kind of faith I want to have, enters the consciousness of Americans. And so in that way, they're kind of like millennials in the sense that we see early on that at various points early on in American history, church attendance really isn't that high necessarily, and affiliation with a specific church isn't that high, even though most people are religious, right? So they're religious, they have religious beliefs, but they are kind of up in the air about how to commit those religious beliefs, which opens the way for the creation of new churches, new faiths, which grow during this time period. All right, Jeffersonian America versus Hamiltonian America. Jefferson's view, right? This stuff I went through in quite a bit of detail. What are the impacts of that view? And who do they influence, right? So Jefferson, I kind of draw a line from the Jeffersonian view about an agricultural America and so forth to Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson changes those ideas, morphs them, right? He no longer believes in this idea of a natural aristocracy and that sort of thing, and doesn't belong to it, but is rather sort of an ordinary guy. And anyway, so we can draw a line there. And then Hamilton's view that believes in a more active government, focused on economic development, debt can be good, all those sorts of things. It has its influences on the North in particular. This has its influence on the South and the West. And then we see the culmination of this in sort of the thinking of John Quincy Adams, who had for his time, very radical ideas about what government should be involved in, right? Like he saw it investing in the arts and sciences and creating national universities and all these things that, especially for a Jeffersonian, Jacksonian, were like crazy go nuts in terms of the sort of concepts that he was talking about. But anyway, we see those evolutions in both those areas. And let's see, how do these differences affect the development of America? So we're not really going to get into the slavery, the intensive slavery stuff that we talked about. That we're moving that along with the Civil War over to the final. But I think it's important for you to know the little bit that we did talk about in terms of how this creates different regions, right? Regional ideas, regional economies, and when those two are sort of in conflict in various ways, and increasingly this leads to cultural changes. The North, the growth of abolitionists in the North who believe that slavery is wrong. In the South, an increasing and deepening defense of the institution of slavery and dependence upon it. A distrust of tariffs and banks, because when things go bad, that's who they blame in the various financial crises of the time, all that sort of thing. And then Alexis de Tocqueville and his commentary on America. He's that French aristocrat who comes and visits. It's just important to know those things that he kind of talks about in terms of what makes America, in his view, American democracy work, which are the fact that Americans join into voluntary associations in order to solve their problems, that they have a spirit of religion which sort of guides them, and that spirit of religion is possible because of the separation of church and state, and the idea that local government is the most important and most powerful level of government in America at the time, certainly isn't today, but at the time, that was the most powerful level of government, and so that putting things at the local level made it so that people could connect to government and connect when they had a problem. He has this idea called self-interest rightly understood or properly understood, where my personal interest intersects with some public interest or public problem, and then I have the ability to change it by getting involved politically. I can't remember if I gave this example, but real quickly, so like the example I always use of this is the town that I worked for in Rhode Island. The chair of the town council was a guy who had never voted in his life, wasn't even registered to vote, and then the city went and cut a line and it flooded his basement, and he said, hey, you guys need to pay for this. And they said, well, because of where the line was, blah, 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 you're responsible and we don't have to pay for it. He went to a city council member and said, hey, you guys should really pay for this. City council member said the same thing that the city said. So then Goslin decided, well, fine, I'll register to vote. I'll file to run for office. I'll beat this city council member and I'm going to change this rule, which he did, right? That is quintessential, like Tocqueville's idea of how America worked, right? I kind of do my own thing. I follow my self-interest, but at the point where it suddenly conflicts with what's going on with the government, then I get involved, and that's kind of what draws people into being civically involved. Okay, that was that in a whirlwind nutshell thing. Okay, I want to give you real quickly an overview of this guild assignment that is open to everybody. This particular assignment that I'm going to tell you about, this one is, the reason why I do it and the reason why I make it available to everybody is because this one connects to the idea that history actually matters to you as a human being alive today. It focuses on the idea that the critical thinking skills that you learn here are actually useful, right? And they're things that employers want and graduate schools want, and that they're valuable. So I run this office, the Office of New Urban Mechanics here at UVU. And this project is sort of based on the type of work that we do. I'll walk you through this real quickly if this thing works. I plugged it in. Off again. Oh yeah, this is the one that's dead. All right, fine. I'll stand here and click like an idiot. All right. So the Office of New Urban... Why is it not even advancing? Okay. So the little quick background about the Office of New Urban Mechanics. There are 3 offices: Boston, Philadelphia, and Utah Valley University, just to make things weird, right? So the first one was put in the mayor's office in Boston, the second one in Philadelphia, and then through a set of curious circumstances, we became the 3rd office. And I run it. And what we do is we try to help cities innovate, come up with innovative solutions to various problems and things that we run into. And this is really important, I think, especially our version of it, because it involves students. And again, kind of this idea of critical thinking, I believe that any student can actually learn how to be innovative, learn the skill set required to do something meaningful, and that it's not something that's confined just to professionals. So part of the problem that we have is this right here, this idea that laws are like sausages and you don't want to see them made. And right, it's disgusting, right? And so, but it plays a critical role in our culture, which is that most of us don't want to get involved, right? We're afraid of getting involved. We don't want to have anything to do with lawmaking or changing things. We're afraid to do it, and we also think that we won't be able to do anything effective, right? That we won't have any influence or impact. So this project that is a guild assignment that's open to everybody is called C-School, and this is actually a competition. So it involves, you guys are all welcome to participate, and there will be other people participating, but by participating you'll get points in this class. This is actually the largest point assignment open to the different guilds. But what C-School does is basically teaches you this, what is actually a really simple approach that involves critical thinking and kind of connecting the dots, like we've been talking about with history, to problem solving, and then you will then go and apply it to solving a problem. So it's actually a partnership between us and Provo City and Orem City, and they're together, Provo and Orem are going to agree on something that they want help on, and then these different teams are going to work on developing a solution. So I'll walk you through the process. But just real quickly, a couple of things about us. So in keeping with what I said before, so students of mine, including like freshmen and sophomores, have worked on changes in environmental policy, education policy, and health policy that affect the entire state. There's a bill right now being debated at the state legislature that was largely designed with the help of my students, and they are from all different majors, right? And so we actually make laws. right? We help lawmakers make laws and programs and change policies and so forth. And so that's part of what this can do. And then this is my shameless why this benefits students. These are some of the programs that the students who do this kind of work have been accepted to. So we're talking about Duke Law School, UCLA Law School, the London School of Economics, University College London, Columbia University, Harvard, Indiana, which is actually the #1 public affairs school, University of Texas Law School, Georgetown MPA and Law School, USC, and Michigan, right? So like I take a lot of students and help them to get into these top programs because the skills that we learn doing this are so valuable. Okay, so how does it work? Hey, look at that guy. Step 1, for this assignment, for this guild assignment, you have to go and register at this thing, right? And then look how his smile is now shiny. So you go and you register at this thing, and you have to go through a training course online, and then you form your team, right? All right, yeah, thanks. My guy in back. All right. So you can either form your team, right? You can have one that's pre-formed, so they're in groups of 3 or 4 students, or if you don't have a team, you can go it alone, and then we'll pair you with other people. This is like really disturbing to me that this Voltron kid, and I watched this I think for 10 minutes last night. I just was sucked in. Anyway, with the ultimate result that you become Voltron effectively and solve all the world's problems. But the idea is you use your team, and then you will have an in-person training as well. This is a sped-up example of us doing the sort of work that we do. It's actually kind of fun because we get to play with toys and so forth and build stuff. Because what we do is we learn how to do a little bit of research, and then we learn how to make a prototype of a solution to the problem that we're trying to address. And we do that with simple tools, all right? And then you compete fiercely against each other, right, for victory. Ultimately, I'm really simplifying it here, people, but then victory for somebody, right, which takes several forms. The first place team for the competition actually wins $4,000, right? There's that smile again. And for this class, that also means that this assignment is going to be worth 115 points if you do it, okay? So that's pretty huge. And the reason why is it's so important for me. I want you to do original research, and a lot of the other guild assignments are about taking primary sources and that sort of thing. But I want you to actually know that the things that you learn here and the type of learning that we're doing, this historical thinking, this looking for patterns, this systems-based thinking, is actually a useful skill that benefits you. So I don't have the specific dates for the in-person trainings yet, but that is where you apply. So I was hoping that today we would have time to have you guys get into groups. I'm not sure, maybe we do still, if we could do it really quickly. What do we think? Okay, all right, we'll do it. We'll do it next time, okay? Nobody pack up yet. I felt that, I saw the coats and the things. Just hold on a second. So we will form you up into teams. These will be your teams for the class, but then if you do this assignment, they can also apply for this class. This particular assignment is fairly involved, and so there's also like a secondary option for it, which I haven't figured out how many points it's going to be worth, maybe like 75 or something. But we will actually need people just on the one day of the competition to serve as the research pool, meaning like this makes more sense as we get into it, but you will be the people that the teams would walk up to an interview and ask questions about this particular topic, right? So a much smaller commitment, but we need people to do that as well in order to make it run well. Okay, so I want to give you the test. The midterm is going to be up on Tuesday after class, right? Starting after class, and then it'll be open through all of Wednesday. So if you want to push it, fine, to the very end of Wednesday, that's fine. The test is multiple choice, right? There are a couple of I think I've got one or two where it's fill in a couple of blanks sort of thing. But for the most part, it's just multiple choice. It's 30 questions, right? So it's pretty short. It is timed, right? It's open note, it's open book, but I put it on a timer, and the reason why why I do that is because I don't like the idea that you're just going to flip through your notes in order to answer every question. I like you to actually know it. And so at the very least, you can go, wait, I know where that is in my notes, and I can go find it and review in order to make sure I get this question right. So the timer is there just to make sure that that works. And assuming that I have it set up correctly, the test will be taken using this lockdown thing, which basically shuts off the rest of your internet and so forth while you're taking the test, if it's working right. If not, we'll see. But if it's working right, that's what it will do. And so those are kind of the parameters of the exam. Also, if it's designed correctly, just so you know, you will each sort of get a different test. In other words, it's going to draw questions that from a pool of questions into your exam. So if you were thinking about just team taking the exam with somebody, that may not work, right? Because you will actually have different exams. All right, are there any other questions about the midterm that I can answer? Way in the back. Is that a hand? How long? Oh, time-wise, it'll probably be 45 minutes. 30. How many points is it worth? Does anybody remember? 100 and something. It'll just be on Canvas. All right, have a great weekend. We'll talk about the West.